After 25 years as a Wall Street heavyweight, our guest today received a seven-figure check and realized the golden egg was actually hollow. He walked away from a billion-dollar book of business to pursue significance over success. Welcome, my good buddy of nearly 20 years, Jeff Thomas, CEO of Arcos Global Advisors. Welcome to the pod, Jeff.
Hey, great to be with you, Rick. This is going to be fun.
It will be fun. It will be fun. And the guys, this is coming after an hour and a half breakfast together with one other buddy this morning. So we are spending the day together. We're going to let you in on some of the inside chat. And but first of all, I hear you on a regular basis talking about what wealth should be. Would you share with us your thinking behind that mantra?
You and I are based in Houston, Texas, so we like energy industry analogies. And so we talk a lot about how wealth on this earth is to be used as a pipeline, not a storage tank. There's an old story in the Bible about a guy who had a big harvest, and he's like, "This is going to be great. I'm going to build a bunch of barns and store all my grain, and I'm just going to kick back and party." God said, "Slow down there, big fella. Use it to bless other people." And that's the real meaning behind having the resources. And so translate that to the energy business, be a pipeline that transports as opposed to a storage tank where it just sits there. There's only so much you can consume. And kind of in the Barnes analogy, it can spoil, if you will. So get the energy moving to bless other people with resources beyond what you need.
And it seems that when you and I met 15, 20 years ago, we were both sort of high flyers. You were in Manhattan a lot. I was in Manhattan a lot. We were all over the place. And it seems like we've both matured over the last handful of years together. And so I want to hear more about your background, how you got into the investment business, which is primarily a relationship business.
Yeah.
And how all that unfolded originally.
I studied business with accounting, kind of concentration in economics at Trinity University in San Antonio. And when I got out, I'd grown up in St. Louis. And I mean, what you do with an accounting degree is, okay, if you got good grades, try to go to what's now the big four or the big three. The big firms were hiring, 5 people a year in St. Louis and 100 people a year in Houston. And so I thought, well, my little math brain said, well, it must be 20 times the opportunity in Houston than there is in St. Louis, and I still love St. Louis. So I moved to Houston for a public accounting job. I was Arthur Anderson back at the time, and I was telling you that story. This is in 1990, and the savings and loan crisis was kind of brewing and coming to a head, and one of the assignments they had me on in that couple of years I was there was, going to D.C. to run the war room of the RTC, which was the Resolution Trust Corporation, where they dumped all of the bad assets for the savings and loans, mostly real estate. It was a fun place for a 23-year-old to be. We were just talking with our friend whose daughter's there, and we were talking about how much fun DC can be as a young person. So I enjoyed a summer there, but my job was to sell those non-performing real estate assets. And the story I told this morning, I'll share with the audience here, is I have a particular vignette that's frozen into my memory forever, which is this guy comes in, we sell him probably for pennies on the dollar, just a ton of commercial real estate. And I remember me being in my poly blend suit, that cost $100. And I think I got 3 free ties with it. Okay. And this guy wearing this beautiful, silk Armani suit. And as soon as he's leaving through the glass doors of the conference room, he's in my head, slow motion high-fiving his buddies with the money they just made on this purchase, And I was thinking to myself, I am on the wrong side of this transaction. If I ever have an opportunity, I'll try. I don't know what that opportunity looks like, but I am definitely on the wrong side of this transaction. So anyway, these are just some fun stories from those days.
And so you were at Arthur Andersen for how long? Because I'm fascinated.
Just over 2 years. It was just a couple of years. And one of the things we did was, so in Houston, Texas, you had 2 divisions within audit. One was energy, and then everything else, which was called commercial. So I didn't know if I was going to stay in Houston forever. I picked commercial because, I didn't want to get maybe pigeonholed as just those energy. So one of the jobs that we were on was a regional broker dealer out of Texas. It subsequently got bought by Payne Weber, and then Payne Weber actually hired me as an auditor. So I'm a former Payne, broker dealer auditor turned financial advisor. There's not a ton of those, I don't think, that go from the audit side to that side. But I got to travel the country. So I was in probably 150 offices in the western half of the United States. And I would interview the most sort of successful advisors in all the big cities. And I knew they had the cleanest book because I could see the audit, or perform the audit and with a little team. And so I really had a head start when I got into the business, kind of having, some advice from some people that were more experienced than I was in the business. So kind of hit the ground running doing that when I flipped to the advisory side a couple of years later.
And so you ended up at Morgan Stanley at one point.
Yeah.
I think it's about the time you and I met. What was that transition like out of audit, out of advisory, out of the consulting world into the investments world?
So in public accounting is kind of a, you got to get your CPA and all that kind of thing. So I did all that stuff. And then internal audit is a little bit different. Your client is the firm you're working for, just kind of almost like you're doing the audit before the SEC does. So, you're sort of just protecting the firm or FINRA or whatever, any of these organizations. But I was always thinking kind of back to the RTC conference room in DC. I was kind of on the wrong side of the transaction again as an internal auditor. I'm like, their goal in life is to keep my salary as low as possible. I think I need to get the revenue side of the business instead of the cost side. So finally, as I became an advisor, I just sort of served all the old financial people. That's the only people I knew. So I just was sort of the CFO, if you will, for people kind of climbing the ladder of these public companies, and grew that for about 5 years on the advisory side at Payne Weber. And then all these big firms, especially back then, compete for talent. So we built a team there, and then Morgan Stanley came and said, that's sort of when the golden egg was offered. They sort of give you a big check for a contract to come and work at their place instead of the other place. So it's that's when I sort of got this check, and I think I was even though I'd been kind of a Jesus follower all my life, I wasn't very mature in my walk, frankly. I think I was making business plans and asking God to bless my plan as opposed to following the plan he has. So when I got this sort of 7-figure check to walk across the street and work at another firm, the guy literally handed me, it was like a physical check in March of 2000 because it was the peak of the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, what are you going to do with the money? And I thought, I have no idea. I'm like the dog that caught the car. I was just chasing the car. I didn't know I'd actually catch the car. And I sort of had this sort of crisis of purpose of what am I going to do? Like, what am I chasing? Success? But what's the definition of success? And anyway, I sort of had this crisis of purpose at that time, when we made that switch.
So you eventually, and how long were you at Morgan Stanley?
Yeah, I was at Morgan Stanley 17 years,
Oh, man.
And so really for those next, I've got some fun stories about that time, sort of at that same time where I'm sort of having this crisis of purpose. I start reading all these like world religion books and stuff like, do I believe this Christian stuff just because my parents raised me that way, And I thought, so I read all these books. I ended up reading The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, who's become a good friend. I was just on a Zoom with him this morning. He's just anybody who's read any of his stuff, he's an amazing writer, but I have good news for everybody. He's a better human than a writer. Wow. And I mean that as a big compliment. He's really a wonderful guy. But anyway, I didn't know him back then. This is like 2000. And I read his book and sort of makes the case for the resurrection and the physical evidence that Jesus did exist. He did die and come back and all these kind of things. And, and that book really helped me kind of re-accept the idea of following Jesus. And so I thought, well, I probably need to read the Bible more. Like I was I thought I had a third grader's knowledge of the Bible, and I'm 31 years old back then. And so I was like, okay, but I don't really know how to do that. I don't really have a system for that. And then I had my oldest daughter was in second grade, and we would leave church. I mean, we'd go to church, but I wouldn't study in that much. Anyway, and every week I'd be like, we're leaving church and going to lunch, and I'd say, wait, what'd you learn in Sunday school? And she'd hold up a little picture, like I made this, this went on like 4 weeks in a row, and she can kind of see my eyes in the rearview mirror, like, really? And I'm sort of being judgy about the volunteer first grade Sunday school people, not teaching my kid enough, And she goes, I'll never forget, she could read she's always had a high EQ. She could read my disappointment. And she goes, the fourth time, she goes, well, Daddy, maybe you and I should do a Bible study together.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, out of the mouth of babes, And like, okay, now not only do I have to find a Bible study for myself, I got to figure out how to do it with her. And but it was like a knife in the heart, because I knew that in that moment, I felt like God was saying, hey, it's your responsible, big boy, for teaching her, not these sweet volunteers. And so anyway, I needed an education. We ended up, long story longer, there was a guy I was working with at Morgan Stanley at the time. Actually, I kid you not, within 2 weeks of that happening, interaction in the car, he comes to me and he goes, hey, I don't know if you know this thing. I'm doing this Bible study fellowship thing, and we're starting a class for second graders. And I was just curious but you and your daughter would have to go together, like almost apologetic, like, would that be okay? And I was like, are you kidding? I've been like, I have no idea anyway, yeah. It's just amazing how specific that was. Like, we're starting a class for second graders. Like, who says that? So anyway, we ended up doing that for years, and that was real joy. And then I started seeing how these things fit together, and that really helped mature my faith and that sort of thing. So all that was kind of going on when you and I met. Kind of at the tail end of that piece. But
you were baby Jeff back then.
Yeah, that's right, man. I still am. I still got a lot to learn, man. I still got a lot to learn.
You're a wee little 31-year-old toddler back then. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess there's something to be said for Christ's assertion that you should let the little children come to him and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. That you don't inherit the kingdom of heaven unless you come like a little child. And there's something not only about the innocence, but also the assumption, like that EQ. It's like we lose that perspective on our emotional intelligence over time, because we're worried about what other people may think about our assumptions. And if we just came to our lives and our faith and our key relationships without the blockages of pride, the blockages of what the proper thing to do is, just came to it like a child, maybe we'd have a chance of having honest relationships. And so, I see the same thing in my kids when they were young. All my kids are older than that now, but man, it's like humility and meekness seems to be a precursor to living an actual authentic life of faith and family and relationships.
I couldn't agree more. I think you nailed it with the contrast between pride and humility, and we were talking about that this morning. Jesus talks a lot about, we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount, right? Like, blessed are the meek, not, and then he's got all kinds of warnings about the proud and the rich and all of these kind of things. And there's just something about humility and having a position of always trying to learn. Like we were talking about, heroes of ours who are successful business people, but are also, even in their 80s, listening to God and having a humble position and trying to learn things and how they can be better to their neighbor by being what is God saying to them, where they can treat the world in a better way and do better with their faith, help people more, be more of a pipeline, less of a storage tank. I think the world tells us to be a storage tank. The guy with the most toys wins. What do you mean? But being a pipeline, forces you to release things. there's a certain dependence and humility that comes from releasing. It's sort of the antidote to the to greed, if you will, and greed and pride. All those things are kind of mixed up together. So we all know when we see examples of true humility, and it's like, man, that's what you want to cultivate. And we also know the repelling nature of pride when we see that, and that's not what we want to be like. So I think you're exactly right. That sort of childlike wonder and humility, can we always keep that? Because the truth is that's the right position, because there is a lot more to learn.
Yeah. And let's carry this pipeline analogy a little further as well, because it seems obvious to me. I'm in Houston as well, just like you. Like we hear work around pipelines all the time. So a pipeline would not be a pipeline unless it was full of nothing, like it was hollow at its very core. Like you can't assume, a pipeline could never assume that it's full and had all the resources it ever need in and of itself, because it would just be a hunk of metal. It has to acknowledge that it's hollow. The second important thing about a pipeline, and I'm learning about this as we're getting into heavy power development and looking at natural gas capability in pipelines, is you got to have the pressure. The pressure has to be there. A pipeline without any pressure is worthless if you're going to generate any energy. And so the man or the woman who is willing to be a pipeline as a conduit not only has to admit that they're hollow at their core unless they're filled by a resource greater than themselves, but also that they can never produce any energy and exert energy on the outside world unless they're put under an immense amount of pressure to make them useful. And here we find we get back kind of full circle to what we were talking about this morning in James. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of every kind, because your trials will produce steadfastness, and steadfastness then make you perfect and mature. It's the pressure. Yeah.
And then the other thing is the volume is greater. So when you have a storage tank, I mean, you just kind of do the math. How much can it hold?
Yeah.
And then it's full, and it just sits there. Okay. Whereas in a pipeline, it's moving through. So you get to be you touch more volume.
Ooh.
The blessings are passing through, and you get the energy that pressure creates momentum, and these resources pass through your hands, but they're not for you. And I think that's kind of the parable of talents, where, hey, I've given you this much volume. Here it is in your storage tank. What are you going to do with it?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to multiply it. God's a God of multiplication and creativeness. And okay, so let's do things. And okay, well, I got 10 more. Well, what are you going to do with that? You're going to sit on it? And think of the guy that he called out was the guy who just buried it. He storage tanked it.
That's right.
You're supposed to use it to multiply and create momentum and pipeline and blessing all around you. So you get to it's more fun to be creative than to just sit there and stare at your storage tank. I mean, there's just no action in it.
Yeah.
You said there's no catalyst, and it's a limited, and then something goes wrong with it. It starts spoiling or whatever's in it. Oh, and then you're just gripping it and you're relying on it instead of just saying, okay, God will keep providing and I'm going to keep being creative and pass it along. I mean, it's just more fun to have those things that are, think of the enterprise that's, constantly creating customer experiences and vendors and all of these, and your employees and all of that stuff. Everybody's experiencing it. And okay, with a piece of the profits, you're doing something too, but the stewardship is way beyond just the money, if you will, that gets used for all kinds of good. So
yeah. Oh no, I like that. Because there's so many different directions you can go with that. You can look at it in the organization. You can look at creative destruction. Like if I want to pursue this strategy, I got to destroy something else in the making. I got to give up something in order to go there. Even like you think about I think the Dead Sea was the one where it has no outlet.
Right.
So therefore it's you call it the Dead Sea for a reason. Anything that doesn't have an outlet, an outflow, in the end gives up its inflow.
Exactly. So So it's not fresh and it stagnates, So it's when you have that underground pipeline, when the water's moving, it's the freshest, right? When you see those stagnant pools, it's like, ew, you can't drink that. That's not life-giving. Things are meant to move, and they clean it out. Anyway, there's a lot of ways you can go with that. Keep moving. Keep moving. Sit there.
And so you were very successful at, I don't know, the top 2 firm. I mean, that's a massive firm, and you decided to pivot a few years ago. Walk us through that decision process and what you decided to do, and your sort of reflection on that period of your life, and how that also impacted your personal life as well, because I imagine there was an impact.
Oh man, there's so much in it, and I really, this sort of vignette that I'm going to tell you is really the crux of that. That book that I wrote called Trading Up, Moving from Success to Significance on Wall Street is kind of I'd say the long version, but I wrote it, so it ain't War and Peace. It's a one plane ride read. Okay, it's simple, and I really just wrote it for my kids to kind of remember this little story that I'll tell you. But so sort of through that period in my 30s where I was doing that Bible study, and I started going, oh wow. And to be honest with you, it's kind of a little humiliating to look back on. Maybe that's the wrong word, but I really thought I was a pretty good person back then. I was like, I go to church, we give money, these sort of things. And what it really revealed to me doing that deep Bible study was what a mess I was, actually. Like that mirror, it was just, man, you start studying that stuff and you get a picture of what true holiness looks like, and you can't help but compare yourself to it. And that gap that I thought the gap was a little smaller. The gap is huge, and it can't be reconciled without Jesus's help, to be honest with you. And so that image in the mirror was a lot uglier than I wanted to admit back then. And so I started. It took me a while to really try to figure out how to clean these areas up in my life to I think get more in alignment with Jesus' teaching. And as part of that, what I was thinking of these things like we're talking about with the pipeline and the storage tank, and like the way God looks at money, as a resource, but also something that competes for our heart. And at that time, I was sort of, doing what they train you to do in these, financial planning kind of situations, where you sort of build financial plans for people, and then here's how big the pile gets, and then how much you're going to spend, and you sort of, spend it down over time, and how much you want to leave for the kids or whatever else. But sort of de facto, one of the things sort of God convicted of me of, I was sort of comparing what I was learning in God's word about resources to the advice that Wall Street in general, and me in particular, and our team was giving. And one of the things I felt uncomfortable about was, even though I didn't say it overtly, sort of in this financial planning where you sort of have this pile, the implication was that you can depend on the pile for your security. And of course, that's impossible. There is no security. God can take it in a moment if he wants to. And so I remember this moment where I, all these big branches have branch managers. And I went to my branch manager and I said, hey, look, I'm going to start telling all our clients that their money isn't actually their money, and there's no security in their pile of assets. And that could be a terrible marketing idea, or business idea, but I feel like God's telling me to do it. And so anyway, if my business implodes, at least you know why. And what's he supposed to say? I don't know why I went to him, but I thought he might get some complaints or something. But and he was just sort of like, thanks, But I started doing that, and I just sort of started having these conversations. I actually got out like a little notebook, and I said, man, I got to change my scorecard from sort of revenue and assets. And every morning, by the way, at Morgan Stanley, we literally had a scorecard button on our computer, and you could see where you ranked globally every day. Okay. And remember, I'm an old recovering singles tennis player, right? I've played singles tennis since I could walk. I played in college. I understood brackets. Okay. that was like catnip for a singles tennis player. Like, oh, it's a bracket. Where do I rank today? I mean, every day, the first thing I did was touch that button. And I was like, I'm not touching that button for 30 days. Like, I heard it took 30 days to develop a new habit. So I didn't touch the button for 30 days. I said, but I need to replace that behavior with something, a more positive scorecard. So I was like, okay, I'm getting out my little notebook and I'm going to write down when I have a more meaningful discussion around money or whatever else. And so, so that could be anything. And so, if at the end of a financial planning meeting, we would say, well, but there really is no security in that number. And they go, what do you mean? Yeah. Well, and we'd have a little spiritual discussion about, God owns it. We don't, we're just stewards. How does that look? Oh, good. I get to write that on my new scorecard, And then this is golly, for at least 10 years, the first 10 years of the business, I don't think I ever prayed with a client. It's just, separation of church and state, can't do that in an office. But I was very convicted. That's not true. And so if they would express something, there's usually a problem, an illness, a child that needs something, whatever it is, I would just, instead of me saying, well, I'll pray about that and maybe forgetting later, just say, okay, well, let's stop and pray right now, and we, oh, good. Let me write that down in my new scorecard, and really after about 30 days, I did develop kind of new habits of doing it this way. And then I had heard from a friend of mine that they had started this. This is when National Christian Foundation was starting in Houston. That's where we met, around that community. Around that same time, a friend of mine at Merrill Lynch had started like a Christian focus group where they were having, the way they framed it was, if you want to market to Christians, we'll teach you how they think about money, like steward, not owner kind of principles. I thought, well, that's neat. I'll start one at Morgan Stanley. So we did that. And, we got it up to about 150 people. I was doing like a monthly Bible study and that sort of thing. And then in like 2006, or early 2007, there's an organization called Kingdom Advisors, and Ron Blue runs that. He's been a great mentor. He said, hey, will you be a coach for this Kingdom Advisor coaching program? And I said, hey, man, I'm as much a player as I am a coach. I'm, like in my late 30s. And he said, I said, hey, how about I fly to Atlanta? It was like 50 advisors from all over the country would fly to Atlanta for like a noon to noon, once a quarter seminar type thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I said, all right, but I'll do it. But how about I fly in early and we spend the morning together and you basically disciple me, mentor me, and then we'll go do that. And so he did that generously for me for 3 years. And at our last session together, we're sitting, and this is the crux of the book, the sort of climax of the book. I still can't believe this happened. It was the coolest thing ever. We're sitting in this little airport Hilton. These airport Hiltons just in Atlanta, with a little bus just goes airport Hilton, airport, right? We're in that little thing, and we're in the coffee shop super early in the morning, and they were the only two in there. And he tells me something. He goes, everything I start gets bigger and better after I leave. And he talked about all these things he started. And one thing he started was essentially a brokerage firm. And I literally heard God say to me, I want you to scale what this guy started. Those exact words, scale what this guy started. It was so audible to me, and I've never had anything like it before or since. So, and I don't know what the theological basis is. I don't really care because I heard it. Doesn't matter. I'm like the blind guy that got healed, and they kept quizzing him on what happened and the theology. And he's like, I don't know. Before I was blind, now I'm not. That dude did it. So all I know is I heard it. And then I had this little conversation. I literally, just like we're sitting here, I asked Ron, did you hear that? And he goes, no, I didn't hear it. And I was like, okay, well, it's just me. So I had this little conversation with the guy. I was like, that sounds really personal and beautiful, that assignment. But, I got 5 people on my team. I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I don't know how to do that. And he goes, I know you don't. I'll do it. You wake up and take instructions and give me the credit.
Wow.
And that's it. So that was 2010, around that. That happened. And so he didn't say start a company. He just said scale what this guy started. I was like, well, I'm already a scaled organization. I got a little bit of favor there. I already got this Christian focus group going. Why don't I just pour myself into that and see how big, can we change the culture of Morgan Stanley? So I did that. for 6 more years. And we got it up to 600 members. And it actually became a cultural problem for the firm. And anyway, I had a few run-ins with management that they made it clear we weren't going to go any further with this experiment. And so I was on my knees after I got that message 6 years later in 2016. And I was like, okay, well, I failed. You told me to scale it. Like I tried to change the culture of a place that was already scaled. I'm sorry, I screwed it up. What am I supposed to do? And I felt like I said, it was time to start something new from scratch, that we didn't have to fight City Hall. We could just do it from scratch with biblical principles and that sort of thing. So we started Arcos in 2017, and it's just been, people used to ask me like in the first couple of years, like, what did you expect and how is it, sort of reality versus expectations? And I used to say, well, we were doing about 50% of what we felt called to do at the big firms. So I thought it'd be twice as fun doing closer to 100%. And maybe you can't do 100% this side of heaven, but you can do, And the joy, the surprise was that it's already 10,000 times more fun. Like just when the mission, vision, values, principle, everything is set from the beginning to go in this direction. I would always just had to fight City Hall on, we sort of had our mission, vision, values as a team, but the company didn't share those. And so there's just always a conflict. To not have that conflict, and you started lots of business, you know how it is to try to fit within a box that doesn't really fit, or just do it yourself. For us, that was just a huge joy. So to be able to serve clients in the way we want to, using the principles we want to, has just been 10,000 times more fun than I expected. So it's been a great ride. So God is holding his word to the promise he made, which is a lot of fun, better than I thought.
And real quick, I've spent 1,000 hours just researching and making this one gift for you, which is the ultimate planning guide, Asset Protection for Family Offices. I broke up the steps to structure your entities, optimize, de-risk, and scale your investments into stages based off your current portfolio. For over 25 years, we work with some of the most stable, most winning family offices all over the world. You can identify where you're at by just putting in your business information. You just go to lumacree.com/protect, and it will send you this custom report that tells you Lumacree's anonymity and isolation techniques that we've learned from family offices. The triple entity structure that we've seen used time and time again across some of the most sophisticated and successful family offices. This is nearly impenetrable to liability. And you're going to see the equity stripping techniques I've learned over the last 29 years. This is our gift to you, completely free. The only thing is that on the thank you page, you can book a call with our team, and we can help you figure out how to get past those constraints to take you to the next level. And so I wrote down the Kingdom Advisors element. What is that? And do you still have any involvement with them?
I do. So we do a lot of teaching around kind of the ultra high net worth space. So we're basically at Arcos running a multifamily office. I mean, the way I always say it is, people sell their companies, they get 50 to 500 million, and then they go, now what? And there's usually some generosity. Most of them are believers. And so we deal with all kinds of issues, from heir preparation to the estate planning to giving plans and all that kind of stuff. So we serve generous business owners as our niche. So within Kingdom Advisors is a nonprofit that educates financial advisors, CPAs and lawyers estate lawyers to a certain aspect, but people who, in the wealth management space, speak to clients about how to implement biblical wisdom into their practice. Ron, lots of other advisors from his generation have really poured into me and many others. There's probably about 4,000 members plus around the country now. And it's been, that's been a real blessing to me. And so we try to kind of pay that forward and sort of teach. So they do like 12, they do like a video every month, for example. They have an annual conference, but about a 20-minute video with a little Bible study that goes around it. So we host one of those, and there's hundreds of those sort of watch parties, studies around. So like last year, I think we produced 2 of the 12 videos on the ultra high net worth space. How do you serve those people in alignment with biblical principles? So things like that pipeline, and what are the 5 biggest pain points, and how do you be a friend? And we do acronyms. Anyway, we have a lot of fun with how to serve our marketplace
Well, you brought it up, and it was actually next on my list to ask you
Yeah.
about. What are some of the frequent challenges that these legacy-minded families have?
Oh man. So what always happens is they come with a pain point, right? Like you don't make a change without pain usually, right? And so we're always talking about kind of catalysts or pain points or what are those things? So like one of the really common things we get, they know we deal with a lot of sort of philanthropic planning stuff, especially if you're having a business exit or whatever. So a lot of times they don't really know what to ask. So they'll say, should I do a donor advised fund or a foundation? And you and I know, like not everybody knows, even people watching this, what a donor advised fund is. Kind of like a online bank account for, you sort of give a lump, like appreciated stock or something, and you put it in an account, you sell it, and then you can sort of give that online, but it's one receipt, and you can do that. Look it up if you want more details. But so it's sort of a giving technique. Where do you create your own foundation, where you write your own checks to wherever? And so it's an interesting question. And we always say, okay, put a pin in that. Good question. Put a pin in that. Now back up and tell us the whole story. Like, okay, grandpa started the business. Dad and my uncle took it over. Now me and my 3 cousins are running this thing. And okay, it's getting complicated. And so it turns out they have other issues. So we sort of have these 7 pillars of things that we sort of look for in that. But a common question is around giving. Like, what's the structure of giving? And again, we deal with business owners. So a lot of times they're so busy running the business, there can be a little bit of conflict at home around a bit of disorganization on the personal stuff, because the business is all consuming, and then you come home and you're just trying to get to the kids' activities. Like, we don't really have a plan. Like, how much should we be spending? We get this 401k from before we started the business. I got this SEP from this other business that we shut down. We inherited a little money from your mom, but it's still sitting there, disjointed, not on the same page. And is probably, you're not going to get on the same page if you're married with your spouse, unless somebody else brokers the peace.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Just not that you're fighting about it all the time, but you both feel a little unorganized.
Yeah.
Another one is because we deal with people who are selling companies a lot. They run so hard toward the exit that one of the big questions is like, what are we going to, like I said before, like, what are we going to do with it? So we do a lot of these sort of whiteboard sessions on, okay, well, how much you want to give and what would that look like? And okay, how do you replicate a paycheck? What does that look like? So how much can I spend? Should I spend? And this is sort of where sometimes you just sort of had a budget based on the liquidity or kind of what you could pay yourself in the business. But now when you get liquid, that number might be, for the people we're dealing with, a lot of times it can be larger, that paycheck, but should it be? Or should we cap our lifestyle and do more giving? And so we have these pipeline discussions. So for us, all of this is about what is God telling you? So the way we look at it is that husband and wife who are the stewards of that piece of the business or all of that business, they are the chief stewards. God is the owner. They are the CEOs, if you will. And we sort of apply for the thought partner. I say COO of the personal balance sheet piece. But that personal balance sheet can become a business to itself. And I think people don't always realize that if you sell the company, you realize that to a certain extent. But sometimes when you're running it, you still have the personal balance sheet to deal with, which can be complicated. So, just sort of lifestyle things can come up. And I would say number one on the hit parade is, what do we do about the kids? And most of the folks we deal with, most, not all, but most, have created more wealth than they grew up with, shall we say? Okay, yes. Maybe not first generation, but a lot of first generation wealth. So one of our favorite phrases is, you got to give the kids the gift of the struggle. and which is sort of counter to what the world says. The world says, I want my kids to have it easier than me, is a common phrase, let's dig into that.
Yeah.
In what way? Because I was like, well, what if your parents had dropped $30 million on you when you were 21? You think that might have changed your level of hustle? And almost to a person, they're like, oh, well, of course. I mean, there's no way I would have. And they tell the story about their business partner. You know what I mean? Like, you've got them.
Yeah, yeah. An easy life is never a good life.
No, it's like the little birdie who's got to get out of the shell. Like, you can't just crack the shell open, the bird will die. Like, there's a certain amount of struggle that creates strength. And so, when I grew up, no, I didn't get a car when I was 16. That's just not the way my neighborhood worked. But my kids grew up in a neighborhood in a school where everybody did get it. And then I'm judging them for wanting a car. I put them in the situation. So recognizing that we're putting them in a situation to have different expectations. And if you say no to things, which you probably should, even though you have the resources, you have to explain it. When your family doesn't have the resources, you don't even ask. There's no explanation necessary. We don't have it. Yeah. Well, when you do have it, it demands an explanation. This is a place where I'm going to create a gym for you to learn how to build muscles that you're going to need in the real world. So I really think number one on the hit parade is preparing heirs. And it's not intuitive if you didn't grow up with that same jungle gym that you have to create in the backyard. You got strong by just having to run laps. Now we got to create a jungle gym. Or it's like the farmer. The farmer thinks gyms are stupid. You're like a farmer who got strong just farming. And they're like, you're in the city now? Like you go waste calories doing this? It's foreign to them. So we have to learn how to build these gyms.
Yeah. You need a lion chasing you in order to figure out that you have to run to survive.
Is that the truth?
So there was this strategy that was going around back in the 80s and 90s here in Houston. And I assume that you've come across this where people that were doing pretty well in life, they would take all their kids, like generally the kids were younger at that time, and they would put $1 million in some sort of trust for them, like each of them. And it got to be a problem. I remember this at NCF. It got to be a problem because 30 years later, these kids would have a massive amount of money, and there was no way for the parents to unwind what they had really put on their kids, which will now impact their grandkids in an uneasy way. What are some of the strategies that you see that do more harm than good?
This is such a great question. We do this simple presentation that I'll summarize hopefully quickly here, called Kingdom versus World Estate Planning. And the purpose of this little presentation, often we'll do it on a whiteboard. I'll just do it verbally, but let's take, frankly, it doesn't really matter what the number is because $1 million can do it depending on how early it is. But let's just take $100 million as an example and say and let's say somebody's got 3 kids. Okay. There is a template that gets used, and you just spoke to part of that template, which is you essentially divide your estate by the number of kids you have. That's it. End of story. And maybe down at the bottom, you give a couple of bucks to a church or some charity that but it's kind of a tip. It's not really material to so that's kind of the template is, in like in my $100 million example, okay, a couple can give $30 million tax-free these days. It's a pretty big exemption, 15 million roughly each. And so, but 70 million, if you've got 100 million, gets taxed at like 45%. Like there's a lot of tax. And so we'll ask people that own businesses that are worth that much, if you died, do you know how much state tax you're going to pay? And they usually say 0. And I'm like, well, you got 3 kids and how's it getting split? Well, it's a third each for the whole thing. I go, no, there's like a big tax bill, 45% of like 70 million bucks. Like it's a $30+ million tax bill. Oh, no. We have an insurance policy, second to die, that pays for the 35 million in estate tax. I said, well, how much you paying for that? $500,000, $1 million a year for the policy. Okay, well, so you realize you're blowing $1 million bucks a year policy, and the government gets like $35 million, like 35 million. Like that's a lot of, like a check gets written to the IRS, and I've heard you, like the rest of us, you're not super thrilled with writing that check. So, and they're like, well, what else should we do? And so we just show an example. Again, we're not trying to prescribe anything. Really, what we're trying to do is get them to think and pray more deeply about what might be the answer. So we just show an example of our tax code in America, which is very generous to givers, by the way, like more generous than most around the globe. What if you, 3 kids, you get $30 million exemption, no estate tax, $10 million each. I'm not saying that's enough or too much. Either one could be true. But 70 million is left over. What if you gave it away? You would have no estate tax. You can choose to go to a charity other than the IRS and not pay that $30 million in taxes. And I don't know anybody that wouldn't rather give it to a charity than to the government. So the 3 questions we always ask people are, how much is enough for you? How much is enough for the kids? And what do you do with the rest? And if you can start answering those questions, most people are not challenged with those questions. Those demand that you speak to your spouse if you're married and ask God, the owner, what he thinks it is. So you might choose to limit how much you live on, how much you give to the children. And then what do you do with the rest? This is where, to me, it gets fun. Is let's say you determine 30 million is enough for you, 30s for the kids, 70 we can give away. Why would you do that when you're dead? If you're not living on, why wouldn't you do that while you're alive? Okay, well, suddenly, hey, kids, here's what we're doing. Would you like to be involved? A lot of people really want to get their kids involved and in what they're doing. What does that look like? Wow, that creates a real life of purpose for the entire family. And boy, other-centeredness. Now you become a pipeline, not a storage tank. All of these principles we were talking about start coming into motion, and you don't have to just sit around and talk about the storage tank. You get to talk about how we're doing this and moving volume through the pipeline. That is the abundant life. And so, but there are some particular things, like you were saying, like we've watched people give a piece of the business, for example, right? We have a guy who, we had about a $20 million business value, and he gave a bunch to his kids and his grandkids when it was worth $20 million. Okay. Well, now it's worth like $4 billion with a B. So none of those little kids, those little grandkids that were 1 year old, to your point, even if you put it in a normal S&P 500 fund, it'd be bigger. But he put it in a company that went from 20 million to 4 billion. Nobody has to work.
Yeah.
They all have way more than they could ever spend in their lifetime. So, and it's irrevocable. So we're having to do work to prepare the heirs. Now it's just a prepare the heir. Okay, so it's coming. So how do we get you ready? Yeah. And unintended consequences. I don't think he would have done that on purpose. He would never have wanted to drop that much money on them at a younger age. But that's the unintended. So principle, maybe don't do that. So we like lumpy, non-dependent gifts. So things like college, some people like having the kids pay for a little bit of it, whatever. But if you want to pay for college, great. It's lumpy. It's an event. That's fine. Down payment on a house. Okay, something like that. A little help with that. Lumpy. But things that create dependency where giving them huge chunks all the time. I mean, people have different opinions on that, but the letting them be dependent on their own work, God, of course, for the resources, but from their own work. One of the things we see commonly is, like, we've had several situations, and I've learned from this because I've got 2 daughters. I know you've got daughters, that this idea of you put a trust in your daughter's name, she gets married. You're trying to protect the trust in case she gets divorced. But sometimes the trust can generate income above what the spouse makes. It creates this weird power dynamic. All of us men want to be providers. And it's cool if women have jobs too. A lot of times they're outperforming from an income. But guys generally want to be providers. And so you got to be careful about your son-in-laws taking away their need to provide. Okay, unintended consequence. Or we've had people buy houses for their daughters and son-in-laws but they can't afford to upkeep it. The intentions are good, but the second order effects are bad. It's not intuitive, and it really takes some forethought to do it well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What if you live to 100 and they get it when they're 70? Is it helping any? So doing it while they're living in a lumpy fashion that's not over the top, that doesn't create bad dynamics, but it's a leg up, but maybe not two legs up on the couch thing is what we like to talk about. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm going on about that topic because that's a hot one. But I think the world's got this broken. There's a lot of mistakes being made in this area.
Yeah. That's so helpful. We talked a little bit on your podcast, this idea of what a wise person looks like. And I set forth in the book, and I talked about it a little bit when I appeared on your show. If the wisest possible mind looks into the most distant future for the most valued reward that it can purchase with the currency of the present. So the wisdom is always looking further out. And sometimes the tax code forces us into a mirage that we believe we're looking further out when all we're doing is we're looking at near-term comfort for the next 20 years to avoid paying some taxes, to look good to our family, to set ourselves up with the power dynamic, when what we're really doing is we're cursing the next 3 generations. And I suspect this comes more so not only by the multi-generational financial gifting and strategies, but it comes even more so through the conversations we're not willing to have that we should be having. And I suspect that the conversation that we are most avoiding is the conversation we most need to have right now. And so as you're working with these families, and especially the next follow-on generations, trying to prepare them for the incoming assault of capital, what are some of those conversations that they're having? What sort of conversations are being avoided in families do you think they need to have more often?
What we were talking about this morning, studying first chapter of James, and our conversation ended up centering on worldview. Like, all of our behavior comes from our worldview. I like to think I knew in my 30s or even my 20s, for sure in my later 30s, yes. 20s, early 30s, I think I knew to say that God owns it all, but did I behave that way? And I talk about that a lot now. We were joking this morning that it's like everybody knows money can't buy happiness, but everybody wants to find out for themselves, including me, unfortunately. Over time, you sort of learn that your way, hopefully, is not the most productive. And if you surrender the decision-making to God and follow his, the plan he has is better than we have for ourselves. You got to get to that point. And when you get to that point, if you can start expressing that worldview to people. And so for me, it always starts with a worldview. And we talk about, what does a full inheritance look like when you're having discussions? And I think, especially I'm in the money business, people come with money questions. And we try to broaden the conversation to other forms of capital. So spiritual capital, we're talking a lot about that today. This sort of worldview that you teach your family. And do you talk about that actively? Or you just go to church and then we just go have lunch and, bury it. Intellectual capital, right? Like, a lot of us aren't leaving the family farm to anybody anymore. I sort of look at intellectual capital as the new family farm. Like, you get an education and then you get a job that you're using your brain to produce income as opposed to the farm and your physical labor. The relational capital, who you know, how to interact with people, some EQ skills. There's character capital. That's sort of an outcome maybe of some of these other things, especially the spiritual. But how do you behave in different situations and when people aren't looking, and golden rule type things. And what we'll often say to people is, and of course there's financial capital. I said, but if you had to bankrupt one, which one would you bankrupt? And to a person, everyone so far has said financial.
Wow.
So the financial, we spend so much time and energy on the financial piece when it's the least important. It's just another tool. Because if they have the spiritual, intellectual, relational, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Then the money can, hopefully we can just use it to give them a leg up, maybe fund a business or whatever, help them out a little bit. Like I know you've done some work on a family bank and that sort of thing. It's like, but how about having conversations? So sometimes we'll have meetings, we'll host family meetings where we'll have everybody go around, parents, children, and what have you gotten from your previous generation in those forms of capital? And what do you hope to give to the next generation? And just have everybody go around the circle. And the other thing we have the parents do is write a letter of blessing to each child, even the black sheep, if there is one. Find things you love about that kid and only talk about the positives. And so let's create some reconciliation and some blessing. Everybody really wants their parents' blessing. So let's give it to them out loud while we're alive, and then discuss these other things that are frankly more important.
This idea that we have different types of capitals is reflected in Gardner's 7 intelligences family assets. So I want to list these 7 intelligences. And just give me your initial take on how relative they are to a family. And so the thinking is that these 7 intelligences form a pattern, form a portfolio of what sort of a wise steward would want. So he wants to see evidences of these things in throughout his family. So this is sort of as he's building the generations, this is what he wants to see. So intelligence number 1 is linguistic. This is the mastery of language and the ability to persuade. It's called the foundational currency of leadership. How frequently do you see that in families, and what is the role of that linguistic from your perspective?
I think we all know. I mean, there's a bunch of business people listening to this. I know I'm not necessarily the smartest one. There was always somebody ahead of me intellectually, but let's just put it this way. I used to have a business partner that was head of an Ivy League institution. Okay. The Houston alumni for this Ivy League institution. So we would always have interns from this Ivy League institution. And they were wonderful people, young people, but not all of them had the gift. They were all extremely smart, but few of them had the gift of linguistic communication. And we all know that, every leadership book on the planet would tell you that your ability to persuade and communicate is more important than the technical knowledge. You can sort of hire the technical knowledge, the programming, if you will. Heck, we can hire a chatbot to do the programming now. But the linguistic communication is the key. And I would say, as it relates to families, more is caught than taught. So if you're a good communicator, odds are you learn from other good communicators. I mean, maybe you had a class or something about it, but generally you learn from other people. And genetically, I think a lot of people have kids who are good communicators. Also, there's some genetic thing about it too. We can all develop it.
Yes.
But I think so. One of my pet peeves is, and I'm also guilty of this, by the way, personally. You sort of burn all of your energy at work, and you come home and crash on the couch and watch Netflix or whatever. And so I think I'm always challenged by the idea of using the same level of intensity at developing the family as I do it at work, and which of course involves this communication. So how do you give them? Let your family learn from how you communicate. If you're discipling, mentoring, leading at work, and those people are developing and learning from that, how do you do that at home?
Yeah.
And lead in the same way and show them that example. So I think generally there is a lack. Most people would complain of a lack of communication within the family unit. We don't talk about things that matter enough. So bring those skills home. Not only will you help your family develop those communication skills, they'll also learn the content together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
of what we're talking about.
Well,
So anyway, that's how I think of it. I mean,
yeah,
how do you think of it?
yeah, I think so too. It's sort of the one that if you can't get the linguistics together, you're not going to have any other piece. And like
Right.
the other components, like you talked about, like the next component, the next intelligence is logical mathematical intelligence, which I think AI ha, has impacted in some way, shape, or form. You have spatial intelligence, you have body kinesthetic, which is the ability to understand tangible things and the physical mastery of those atoms over bits. Musical intelligence. He says that there should be a intelligence of music, understanding the rhythm and the patterns that correlates to high level systems thinking and timing and market cycles. Do you sense? I know your wife's musical, but are you? You're musical too. You sing.
Well, I sing poorly. There was a rule in my family growing up that you had to take, and we didn't have many resources. I had a pastor and a teacher as parents, but my parents thought music was very important, and so my sister and I don't know how they came up with this, but we had to take 6 years of private lessons of some musical instrument.
Wow.
And I have a devoid lack of talent in the music department, but I dutifully did my 6 years. I think 4 years of piano and 2 years of trumpet because I was so bad at the piano. But you do learn to read music. You do appreciate. I mean, so and there's again, I'm no expert in this area, but there is something about some scientific people are really good at music. It's really
Yeah.
interesting. There's some kind of correlation between the way things fit together, kind of the way God made the scales and the music and some scientific connections. Not always, but I've noticed there's some engineers and scientists that are really amazing, can be amazing musicians too, because they kind of see how it all blends. I just think it's also another dimension for us that it's just hard to describe. What does music do to you? It gives you a different feeling and a way to connect to different ideas and thoughts, and it's a beautiful thing. That life would be worse if we didn't have it.
Yeah.
So anyway, God's got a purpose for that, way beyond what I can understand, I think. But we all enjoy it.
When's the last time you picked up a trumpet?
Been a while, man. I wasn't that great at that either. My family has more talent in that area, but yeah.
So little known fact, I was a trumpet performance major in college.
No, you weren't.
Yes.
How did I not know this?
Yeah. So in my college, you sort of think about this. You have middle schools feeding to high schools and high schools feeding to colleges. I was first chair in college, and I was playing professionally for a good period of time. In fact, I used the money that I made playing professionally, and I went to a school district, Jeff, and I got the contract to give private instructions to all their top trumpet players in their high schools.
Wow.
And so I had, I don't know, 25 or 30 trumpet students that were high school players as I was in college. I remember doing crazy things. So I was in college when the year changed from 99 to 2000.
Yeah.
And we had some big bands that I played in. In fact, I actually led a big band in college for a little while.
That's fun.
Yeah, I got hired to play in a big band for the turn of the century, or I guess turn of the century, whatever. It's kind of the new millennium New Year's party. So I was playing as it turned 2000, but everyone was so worried that the world was going to explode, right? Because all the computers, they didn't know what to do with the year 2000, and everything would go backwards. We'd lose power, like we would be set back 100 years, and there was all this concern there that we were able to bid up the gig rates for that evening. So, man, I think so. This is 2000. I think I got paid $1,000 an hour, $1,000 an hour to play that night in a big band, and it was like one of those like once in a lifetime opportunity. Of course, I was still finishing up college and stuff back then.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, I mean, I certainly see how that ties in the linguistic, the musicality, and also the technical domains. I mean, it certainly is helped mathematically. I wasn't very strong mathematically in high school or college, but I understand sort of the basic interrelationships between mathematical concepts, just simply because that's all music is math.
Exactly. Let me ask you this. We use the term around here in our business, playing jazz. We actually use that a lot.
Oh, really?
Because the way we use it is, like I take this sort of prototypical, somebody selling a company, they know we deal with people like that. They want to be generous. So our product is called a whiteboard session. All right. We intentionally don't have a name for it. I mean, it's called the blueprint process, but we don't, and we have these 7 pillars, and we know what we're looking for, but we want to do the narrative over the numbers. So they ask sort of tactical questions. We say, good question, put a pin in it. Anyway, give us the whole story. And as we unpack the narrative, so we sort of have these 7 keys, or you would know better, like chords, or we know what notes fit together, but we're gonna put those notes in an order that makes sense for what the person in front of us needs. So we're not going to come with a pre-written sheet of music. We know what the harmonies are, and then we're going to kind of write the music for them, this song, using those notes and keys and things that we know blend, but putting them together in an order that makes more sense for these people. So we call that playing jazz. So we train people to not be formulaic.
Yeah.
It's not paint by numbers. It doesn't matter what they say. You're going to do this and then that and then this and then that. No, you've got 7 things, colors to work with, notes, keys, whatever, chords, and then put those together. But we're playing jazz. We're not painting by numbers. What, as an actual musician, what does that mean to you? Like, is there a difference between people who just like to play the note perfectly and jazz musicians? I'm just curious what your reaction to that thinking is.
Yeah. If you're a jazz musician, you're definitely a different sort of individual. And I haven't played in years, but if you want to correlate like this, like the people that love musicality and the discord in that musicality are a unique type of breed. So if you think about a chord being a 1-3-5, you always skip a note in order to get a chord, right? 1-3-5. People that know music basically as C, E, G would be sort of the simplest form of a chord. Well, a jazz player might add a B on top of that, which would provide friction between the B and the C. I'm not going to get too complicated here, but some people like to add an extra note on top of that, which creates additional levels of discord, and like to modulate those notes up and down a half step or a full step to create some additional discord. Like that jazz player, a really great investor will seek risk in different and disproportionate amounts based off of their familiarity with the area. So an investor who is not acclimated to playing jazz is the person that may want to look at a heavily S&P 500 focus or a Russell 2000 focus or a more plain vanilla type of CEG chord. That sounds good to everybody. It's reliable. You're going to be able to get through there as long as the world doesn't explode. But there's certain other investors that want to have some hedges. They may want to have a little bit of additional exposure in certain domains that they have special proclivity to understand, whether through professional work or through their hobbies. And those are the people that are able to play a little bit more highly discordic forms of jazz by having more friction with the portfolio. They find the beauty through the friction. So I certainly see, Jeff, how that interplays, because it's a personality, and that personality drives the cognitive reasoning that gets them to the place where they're willing to have that sort of that risk, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's that hunger in the belly.
This is so fun to talk about. I've never thought of it this way with this analogy, but I love your background in this and how it fits with what you're talking about, because I was never a great actual jazz musician, even though I think I'm good at jazz in the thing I know, which is not the music world, but in the sort of money management. Like that's the thing I feel comfortable playing jazz in this business, if you will. So whatever industry you're in, you're probably a little comfortable with the discord or dealing with the
Yes.
unknown. But I've always been super impressed by jazz musicians because even though they appear wild and crazy, they know exactly what they're doing. They know what sounds they're creating. There are some keys and rules to the game that they're playing within, even though there's freedom within it. But I think I like what you said. They're taking risks.
Yes.
They don't even probably know exactly what they're going to do, but they know how it all fits together because they're sort of savants of this style. And we're dealing with business owners often having liquidity events. Well, 90% of the time, they want some level of jazz, the freedom to play some jazz. And so it's the same as jazz musicians. There are chords, and there's always a little bit of discord, but there's generally rules around the box, but there's freedom within the box.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. The equivalent of that, I think, would be that the majority of jazz is played over 8 bars, so 8 measures. And
Right.
you know that the beginning, when you go back to that 9th measure, which is the first, like
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you go to the next measure,
Yes.
it generally starts the next key. And that first measure and the 9th measure and every subsequent 8th measure after that goes to the root chord. It's the C chord.
Exactly.
It's the major chord. It's home base. That's right. It's home base. And in that home base for the investor, you can look at it this on an income sheet. It's the carry cost. It's like, It's that paycheck. So how much do I need to support my lifestyle? Then everything above that, given a certain level of risk and exposure and duration of the investments, every turn of the quarter BIP or whatever it might be above that, those are all exposures, but they know that as long as they carry the carry costs, they can get back to the first measure. They can get back to the 9th measure. They can understand where they're at. So they can play the jazz on top of the other chords as they're moving along. They can experiment. They can play some accidentals that do not appear in the key in which they're playing, but they can always get back to the initial bar. They can always pay the bills.
The bass player. There's also that bass line, the bass player going up and down with the laying down the foundation also while it's all going on. So I think what we'll often do is create, like you said, there's a baseline that needs to be done and there's excess capital. And oftentimes we'll just sort of imagine we take it off the balance sheet because it's not needed necessarily. So we're taking risks that if it blows up, it's not the end of the world. Okay. But inside of that, so that's where we go, okay, boom, you can play jazz. Now, here's the key. So let's say they want to make, it's X dollars in this box. And the rules of engagement are, it's going to be in the industry we came from where we have an advantage. And we want to back young entrepreneurs. We want to have active involvement in the businesses. And we're going to make somewhere between 5 and 10 of these investments. And one of them might hit a home run. We might strike out on all of them. And it's also a place I'm going to spend my time, not just my financial resources, to do some mentorship and that thing. So I think I think that's an important principle of maybe not getting too formulaic. Again, if you're called to be a jazz musician, create the place for the music to happen.
Yeah. And that's the danger, I imagine, with the people that you're dealing with, especially the first generation entrepreneurs. Their gut has always worked for them. So they assume that their gut will always work for them in other domains. And that's what we come across with quite a bit. We do some third-party representation negotiating big commercial real estate transactions. Like I got a 46-story one in downtown Houston right now. I'm negotiating. The family office that we represent, they're from the Northeast Manhattan area, and they want to negotiate. And I'm like, well, negotiate 300 of these things. Mm-hmm. And I have no skin in the game, and I've done it for myself and in my personal record. I've got a 40.3% IRR lifetime average. I can offer you the same thing, or you can play craps with it and see and find out whether or not your gut works cross domains. But they prefer that excitement. I suspect there's got to be at some point that difficult conversation that, whether it's around luck, or playing your gut or playing your emotions or wanting to be the deal maker at some point, where these guys primarily need to hand over some modicum of risk to a professional like yourself?
I love this conversation because we always like to say, again, in our niche, if you've seen one generous business owner, you've seen one generous business owner. The beauty and the challenge is that we're all different. And this is why this sort of worldview matters. If you believe that we're all uniquely and wonderfully made, there is a set of notes that God has told us to play with.
Yeah.
But so those are the principles under which we operate, but the way we apply them is unique to everyone. So, but one of the principles is we already hit on it, is be creative. Like God put us in the garden to be creative and till the garden. Like we're to work, like this parable of talents we talked about. Like just because you sell a company and you've got enough to build bigger barns and sit back and relax doesn't mean you should. You have to re-risk in some way. What does that mean? You have to re-risk. You cannot just sit on it and not do anything. We'll often say retire, like RE-tire, like put new tread on. What are you going to do? And this is not just about the money. We've already talked about the other capitals. What do you do with, what did you call them? The seven intelligences, the other forms of capital. These are the gifts you've been given. You do not have the luxury to sit back and not use them. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean you put every nickel that you just made on the exit of the business on red. That's not what that means. It means don't just sit there and be a storage tank. How do I put the gifts God has given me, including probably some of the capital, how do I re-risk? How do I keep using the stuff God gave me to be a pipeline of blessing to other people? That stuff needs to keep going through you. And I think our society tells us to do the opposite. You earned it, Rick. You don't have to, why are you going to do another deal? Just put it in 10-year treasuries and kick back and go sailing every day. I mean, you're not going to find joy in it. That's the truth. And so that when people buy into the lie that I'm going to exit and just have fun, it's not fun. They don't feel satisfied. God set up the system to invest in other people, in all these other capitals, including financial, in a way that becomes a blessing to them. We're supposed to lift each other up by honoring Him, by lifting other people up. It's philanthropic, it's investing in people, it's all those things. And that doesn't mean you have to re-risk every dollar in private deals that have a low risk of blowing up. What is God telling you? How are you supposed to use all of these resources to be a blessing to other people, including your business skills and some of your capital in an appropriate fashion? So anyway, this whole idea of just shutting it down once you have a big exit is just nonsense.
Yeah. We may need to have a different conversation about re-risking and risk, because I think that we don't have that many hours left in the day.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah. Okay. So on the risk standpoint, it seems to me that this is from my entrepreneurial self. So I haven't had a liquidity event like your clients have, but I would imagine myself as a predecessor to the type of person that's your client, who's used to making all their own decisions, going on hunches. We've been through 1,000 iterations. I've been through 300 transactions. Like I can probably negotiate the one thing you've never done before. Let's not experiment on your biggest financial transaction. But it seems to me that I want to take more risk in the areas that I understand, right? The only reason I would diversify is because I think there's a probability that I'll be wrong, right? And so if I know that I'm operating within an area that I understand, and I know that I have the control necessary to take charge when disaster happens, I should probably put it all on red in that circumstance. But then I come to the reality that there's such a thing as decision fatigue. Like I can't make every single decision. If the more decisions I'm making, probably the higher probability that the gross totality of all of them have a lower probability of success, would be, I imagine. So at some point, I got to slow down the decision making that I'm making. And so I need to come to someone like you to help me with the preponderance of that. What are the conversations like when you encounter someone like me who thinks in those terms, that then has a liquidity event and is trying to figure out, like how do I pivot? How do I pivot to that new reality? I can't make decisions all day, every day. And I got to get into other industries and other investment types.
Remember Bob Buford's book, Halftime?
Oh, yeah. Your book, when I read your book, I immediately had to go and read all of Bob Buford's books.
Yeah. So I if you haven't read it, go read it. It's a story about selling the family business and having a liquidity event and being a believer, and then just going, well, and frankly, even if you're not a believer, I think you should read it. If you're having an exit, now what? And I like to joke that halftime is a euphemism for the Christian midlife crisis, but maybe just for the midlife crisis in general. Like, what do I do now? And I think Bob created an organization called Halftime, a nonprofit, and there's a guy that the podcast you've been on. Everybody go listen to Rick's episode of the Generous Business Owner podcast. And but another, after you listen to Rick's, listen to Lloyd Reeb's podcast. He's a genius halftime coach, and the genius of his process. There's a lot of neat tools he has and exercises, but to me, the best part of his sort of coaching is the peer group. And I think there's the old line that it's lonely at the top. And there are a lot of people listening to this who frankly wish they could have conversations like this. There aren't that many people that we have this conversation with, a wide ranging, like, how do we talk to our kids? What about the business? What about after you sell the business? How much do I diversify? How much do I just re-risk? Like, these are the real questions. Like, we're getting into the real stuff that people deal with. And there's not that many people you can have that conversation with that really have your best interests at heart. Even if you're a believer, you think your pastor wants something from you, the nonprofit leader that you give money to wants something from you, your employees certainly want something from you, maybe your kids want things from you. Who can you talk to? And what Lloyd does is create these little peer groups, like 5 people in a peer group, and they don't want anything from each other. They're in the same socioeconomic situation, and they get to know each other, and they give advice to each other. And so one of my favorite stories that I took from one of Lloyd's books, Finishing Well, that I put in my book, is just a perfect example of this. And I've got others, but this one is just so compelling. True story. There was a Chinese American guy who had a very successful tea business. Like he was in the U.S., immigrated from China, and had this U.S.-based tea company. It was exporting teas all over the world. But his heart, if you had met him, first thing you wouldn't have even known unless you looked him up, what he did for a living. You go, hey man, tell me what you're about. And he's like, oh, I support orphanages in China. And he's an amazing photographer. So he would show you, he'd like have his phone and he'd be showing you pictures of these precious orphans in China. That's what he wanted to talk about. And so he was thinking as he entered this coaching, I think I'm going to sell my company and so I can invest more in these orphans. I mean, that sounds reasonable. What a nice thing to do. Others-centered, pipeline. Okay, checks the boxes. But as he got in the peer group, a suggestion was made and sort of confirmed in the group that again, they have nothing to gain. It's peer-to-peer. What if you put a picture of those beautiful pictures? What if you put one of those beautiful pictures on the back of each box of tea and with just a little website about how, just a couple of sentences and how to donate. And he said that's what he ended up doing. And he raised way more money than he would have selling the company. I'm not saying that's we're not prescribing anything. I'm just saying this is the value of a peer group, a group, frankly, like we were in, like even a little group like you put together that I'm a beneficiary. We get together, do a little Bible study, but really we're talking about life, and we can see things in each other. And so for me, the wealth management business is just an excuse to do that with people. I just get to be on the team that thinks with people about these things. And then I have some finance. So I just have a lot of stories about other people that do it. And then we know how to execute on the financial pieces, especially if there's philanthropy involved. I take a step back, and that's the beauty. You cannot be formulaic about how to re-risk or who should do what. I mean, there are tendencies and principles, of course, using the skills God's already given you. That makes sense. How far do you translate them to something new? If God says go do it, no matter how crazy it sounds, you should go do it. But usually it's probably using the leadership, communication, the industry you were in. Usually the little box of jazz that we're doing has something to do with the historical success markers. But maybe instead of going all in with every nickel the way you did to build the wealth, you got a chunk that you invest in 5 or 10 other people and disciple them to grow it. And you'll probably make some money on the way, but you might just be mostly it's for their benefit in their sphere of influence. But I think it almost always takes a group of people who have your back to speak to you with the proper values, who have your best interest at heart. I think if you can find a few of those people to speak into you, wow, man, that's the magic. So anyway, that's how I think about that.
So I want to bring up the last two of these 7 intelligence, because it has to do exactly with what you just said. The number 6 is the interpersonal. This is the sales leadership asset that you want to instill in the families, multiple generations. This is the ability to read and move other men to achieve a shared vision.
Yes.
Precisely what you just talked. So that's the interpersonal. And the very last 7 of the intelligences that you want to steward as a portfolio is the intrapersonal. This is the wisdom asset. This is the disciplined pursuit of self-truth and the ability to see reality clearly before acting decisively. If you think about that, like that's the perfect peer. That's the perfect peer.
Right.
Someone where you can move me, but the reason why you can move me and you're owed to be able to move me is that because you also have the disciplined pursuit of self-truth and the ability to see reality clearly from your perspective, the things that I can't see. I can't see the log in my own eye. I can't see my blind spots. I can't see the thing. I know there's all these little things, and I'm always wondering about this, Jeff, is like when I go have breakfast with you guys, and I'm looking at a group of people that I respect a lot, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what do they know about me that I haven't realized yet? Me as nearly 50-year-old man.
I have opinions on that. We'll work on that together.
Yeah.
I was thinking of some of those things this morning. I promise you. And I was thinking of it in anticipation of this morning. So I actually have some thoughts on that we'll share offline. But I'm the same way. I tell people my calling is generally to help high capacity, mostly men, uncover their God-given calling and give them oxygen to live it out. So I say my highest, best use, what I've noticed that I'm most helpful, I call it around the fire pit, the proverbial fire pit, even if it's not a real fire pit. It could be in Chick-fil-A where we met. But I enjoy the process of seeing how other people, what are their strengths, and calling those things out and giving them oxygen. I'm not that great at it for myself. So even though I think I have a gift in that area for other people, I'm blind largely to probably 80% of that stuff. So I need other people to do it for me. I just think this is the way God made us, is to be it forces us to be in community, to find how to re-risk or steward all these gifts we have to their maximum. I think we have to do it in community to speak to each other and to execute generally in community with other people with other skills, like every other organization. Business people know that, or anybody who's led an organization, they know they can't do it alone. But when you have to put yourself maybe in a new arena, what should that new arena be? I think it helps to have a peer group. Figure that out.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Your book Trading Up made this comment to you offline, but I think there's only two books that I read in one sitting, and one of them was your book, Trading
It's also
Up.
the second shortest, so that helps. But yes, thank you.
Well, but it was so it was like a mirror. It was like a
Yeah,
mirror in a
yeah.
way, and so I really do appreciate that. Again, I do not appreciate all the halftime Bob Buford references that then made me go having to read
Did you
another
take
five
you down a
books.
rabbit hole?
Those
Yeah.
were not short books. Those were
No,
not
no,
short
that's
books.
true. Those are longer. You're right.
Yeah. So shame on you for
Yeah,
referencing other
thank you. Yeah,
books.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Like a gateway drug is what your book was. So, but I encourage people to find that on Amazon, Trading Up, Moving from Success to Significance. And then you also have this podcast that you
Yeah.
recently celebrated. I think your 300th episode. Tell us about how that got started, how that set up, because it's just really a fascinating project that I've watched since 300 episodes now.
Yeah, at least 200. We're getting to 300. It's funny that you talk about taking you down a rabbit trail. I got taken down a rabbit trail around the same time we met, so we've probably been on similar rabbit trails. But 20 years ago, my goal in life was just to be a tickled tither, and I thought I'd be in the sort of Hall of Fame of givers if I just gave 10%. Okay, an event put on by Generous Giving where I heard the story of Alan Barnhart, who he's in his mid 60s now. When he was in his early 20s, getting out of college, become a believer, marrying his college sweetheart. She was a strong believer. She wanted to go into the mission field, and in Saudi Arabia, she wanted to be a Christian missionary in Saudi Arabia. She wanted her husband to go with her, and that's what they were going to do. And she was very committed to this path. Okay, they're just getting married. He wanted to take over the family business, which was 2 cranes, like that lift things, that his parents rented from what he calls the world headquarters of their bedroom in their house. Okay. And they were not believers, and they were going to sell these 2 cranes either to their sons or some third party, buy a boat and sail around the world. And they did. But they sold it to their sons. So Alan somehow convinced his wife that they would do the business instead of being the missionaries. And I just interviewed him recently with her. I had never interviewed her. I'd seen her talk some, but I said, well, how did you get on the same page? She goes, oh, I didn't get on the same page. She goes, I was mad. I couldn't wait till the business failed so we could go to the mission field. I mean, I love how honest she is about this. Anyway, the compromise for taking over the business was that they would set their salary at what the mission board would have paid them. And if they made more than that, they'd give it away. So the first year, 40 years ago, they gave away $50,000. That's pretty good for like right out of college. Okay. And they've continued this for 40 years. And so I think they've got 6 kids. So they did raise their income along the way a little bit, but not much. Alan now pays himself $100,000, and they gave away something like $55 million last year. Okay. It's about $1 billion revenue business. And even 20 years ago, when it was on that path, a few hundred million in revenue, here I am just trying to be a tickled tither. He blew my paradigm out of the water. Like he's giving like 99.99. Like he gave the whole company to his foundation. There's now 6 committees of 10 people each, 60 people figuring out how to give all this money away every year. I always say, oh, that's the fun part, giving the money away. He's like, no, that's harder than making it, to do it well. Like he's a total engineer. So that's the most radical story, to be fair, that I've ever heard, but it broke my brain. And so he's become a friend and a mentor of mine. We've given 30% of Arcos away in the same sort of way he's doing it. We may do the whole thing as God leads. Another friend of ours, Jeff Rutt, is also a friend of Alan's. He's given 89% of his company, a home builder on the East Coast, away. And the 3 of us have been so blessed by this sort of approach to doing things that we started this podcast to tell stories of other business owners. How do they use their platform? So we had you on to share. You're behind them on the journey, but you've built businesses and you're still building. And how do you think about these things? So nobody thinks they have it all figured out, including Alan, by the way. He thinks the way he's done it is a good way and it's got him on a good path, but he's not done. He's re-risking in his own way every day. So there's a lot of this. I'm glad we started with this analogy of the barn building versus the pipeline. It's such a good analogy. I think the world tells us to build barns and storage tanks and sit back and be merry. And we all know it's not ask the lottery winners. It's the worst thing that ever happened to them. They don't know what to do with it. You have to keep re-risking and using these things. So how do you do that? So we're just trying to tell countercultural stories of people using their business as pipelines. And they may have exits. Okay, well then how do you re-risk? Like, what are the stories of people doing pipelines, not storage tanks? So we're just trying to normalize these stories that are out there and give people a different image. Just like Alan broke my brain, go listen to Rick's, go listen to Alan's, get your brain broken on what is possible. What is a new paradigm? What are things that you can pray about to use the platform you've been given? No matter how small, if it's $1 million business or $1 billion business, it doesn't matter. It's the widow's mite. It's what you use with what you're given. You don't have to say, well, I'll do that when I get to X. Do it today. So we're just trying to tell stories that inspire people in that way.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. Share with folks about Arcos, about what the organization looks like today, where you envision it'll go over the next handful of years.
So I'm probably a little too obsessed with this topic, I admit. But remember that in 2010, when I'm sitting with Ron and God spoke to me and said, I want you to scale what this guy started. So God said, scale something around the Bible and wealth management. I largely assume a piece of that will be Arcos. So I think we're a little over 6 times bigger than we were in 2017. So the deal is I get on my knees, as he asked, every day and ask him what to do. And then we try to do it. And we have the whole team doing that. And we're just trying to get our antenna tuned to him and listen to what he tells us to do and then go do it. And so I always say all of my ideas are garbage, but all of God's ideas are amazing. And so we listen to him as much as we can. And so the job is to kneel, listen, execute, and give him the glory. So praise God for what he's already done. But we think I intend for it to be a scaled organization. So why isn't there a multifamily office that's unapologetically running on biblical principles, but willing to serve all comers? We just think we have the knowledge from 25 years of working in the traditional Wall Street firms. We know how to do what the world knows how to do. We've studied God's word and we want to execute in alignment with his principles. Why isn't there a firm that can be excellent by the world's standards and also in biblical alignment in that family office space? So for generous business owners that are still growing the business, but especially when they exit, that's where the enemy can really get in there and mess with things. That's a real risk area. So that's a particular focus, but we really deal with business owners who want to be generous and help them to execute on those plans that God whispers in their ear. We always say God is whispering plans in the ears of these people. And all we want to do, or planting seeds might be a better analogy. And all we're trying to do is water those seeds. We're not talking anybody into anything. God's telling them what to do. We're just executing on those plans.
So the jet and the condo in Vegas are not the first steps after you get to liquidity.
Jeff Rutt has he has a great story about, because he gave away the business later in life. So he already had a big management team and this sort of thing. And one of the guys, there's actually a joke that Jeff Rutt, he has like a wooden jet on his desk because the joke is no jet for Jeff. Okay. Now we have plenty of generous business owners have jets. It's not about the jet, just like it's not about the barn. But here's another story from Jeff Rutt that I really like. After he gave away the business, 89% signed the papers. One of his managers came up to him and said, "Hey, you're one of us now. You just work here." You know what I mean? Like, sort of an acknowledgement that God owns the business anyway. But I'll say this, like, about the whole jet thing. I don't want to be prescriptive. There's nothing in the Bible says you have to have this lifestyle. And there are plenty of people who have jets. And if God says go buy a jet, you should go buy a jet. And it can move if it helps your pipeline flow, Godspeed. But just ask the owner. Don't ask me or anybody else whether that's appropriate. Ask the owner. and he'll tell you what to do. So I'll just say this. In sort of the analogy of the barns, remember that like the rich fool, God said, don't build the barns. But remember that like Joseph, when he started working for Pharaoh and there's a big famine coming, God said, build barns to help other people because it was going to be a pipeline. Like the barns would help feed the people. So it's not about the barn. It's not about the jet. It's about what are you going to do with it? So anyway, you get me on my high horse. You got me all lathered up here. Sorry about that.
Folks, go buy the book on Amazon. Subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast. Check out Arcos on ARKOS.
Yeah.
And Jeff, thanks so much for joining me on the pod. Had fun, enjoyed it, and I look forward to doing this again many, many more times.
Always a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, DM me over on LinkedIn. You can just search Rick Walker TX. You can just Rick Walker TX over on LinkedIn. Feel free to DM me there. And you can watch this video next to help move your family, move your legacy, move your wealth and your wisdom to the next level. Thanks, guys.